The red warning light blinked on the bridge of the UES Defiant, and Captain Jake Morrison knew his quiet patrol was about to end. The communication officer, Lieutenant Ben Carter, looked up from his console with worry written across his face. "Captain, we're getting a distress signal from Station Omega 7. It's weak and breaking up, but it's definitely a code red emergency." Morrison stood from his command chair and walked to the main display. Station Omega 7 was a mining operation in the Kepler sector, right on the edge of disputed space. The station was jointly run by humans and the Sorak Confederation, one of the first successful partnerships between Earth and an alien species. "How long since their last regular check-in?" Morrison asked. Carter checked his logs. 18 hours, sir. They missed their scheduled transmission this morning. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes, the ship's tactical officer, turned from her station. "Captain, that sector has been quiet for months. The Hive Collective hasn't been seen in that area since the peace talks started." Morrison nodded, but something felt wrong. The Hive Collective was a species of insect-like creatures that worked as one giant mind. They had been expanding their territory for years, taking over planets and turning everything into resources for their endless reproduction. The recent peace talks had supposedly put limits on where they could expand, but Morrison never trusted bugs that thought with one brain. "Set course for Omega 7, best speed," Morrison ordered, "and send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're investigating a possible emergency." The Defiant changed course, its engines humming as the ship accelerated toward the mining station. Morrison had been to Omega 7 before during diplomatic missions. It was a small but important facility that produced rare minerals needed for both human and Sorak technology. More importantly, it was a symbol of cooperation between species that had once been enemies. 3 hours later, they arrived at the station's coordinates. What they found made Morrison's blood run cold. Station Omega 7 was still there, but it was dark. No lights, no communications, no signs of life. Worse, there were ships surrounding it. Black, organic-looking vessels that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Hive ships?" Hayes said quietly. "At least 20 of them." Morrison stared at the display. The Hive ships were attached to the station like parasites, their hull breach equipment boring into the metal structure. Through the scanner, he could see movement inside the station corridors. "Life signs?" Morrison asked the science officer, Dr. Kevin Park, ran his instruments over the station. "I'm reading approximately 300 life forms inside the station. Most are Hive drones, but there are also human and Sorak life signs. They're alive, but they're being moved toward the station's cargo bays." Morrison felt his stomach drop. He knew what happened to prisoners taken by the Hive. They were processed, broken down into biological components, and used to create more drones. It was a fate worse than death, and it was happening right now to people under his protection. "Can we identify any of the prisoners?" Morrison asked. Park worked his console, trying to get clearer readings. "I'm getting some individual biosignatures. There are definitely children among the humans, Captain. And I'm reading one Sorak that matches the diplomatic profile for Ambassador Kethver." Hayes looked up sharply. "Ambassador Kethver? He's supposed to be negotiating the new trade agreements. If the Hive has taken him, she didn't need to finish." Morrison understood. Ambassador Kethver was one of the most respected diplomats in the galaxy. His capture would be seen as an act of war by the Sorak Confederation. "Sir," Carter said from his station, "I'm also reading familiar human biosignatures. One of them matches Lieutenant Danny Hayes." Morrison saw Lisa Hayes go pale. Danny was her younger brother, a mining engineer who had volunteered for the Joint Operations Program. He was only 23 years old. "Captain," Hayes said, her voice carefully controlled, "we need to act now. Every minute we wait, more prisoners are being processed." Morrison understood her urgency, but he also understood the law. The Kepler sector was disputed territory. According to the Galactic Council's treaties, no military action could be taken in disputed space without proper authorization. The process took weeks, sometimes months. "Carter, send an emergency request to the Galactic Council. Tell them we have a humanitarian crisis and need immediate authorization for a rescue operation." Carter worked his console and then looked up with a grim expression. Sir, I've sent the request, but the automatic response says it will take a minimum of 14 days for review. That's assuming no one objects or asks for additional hearings. 14 days? Morrison looked at the display showing the station. The hive worked fast. In 14 days, there would be nothing left to rescue but empty shells. Captain, Dr. Park said, I'm reading increased activity in the cargo bays. The hive has set up processing equipment. They're beginning the conversion process. Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about the oath he had taken when he became a captain. Protect human life. Defend the innocent. Uphold the laws of Earth and the Galactic Council. But what happened when those laws conflicted with each other? Sir, he said quietly, my brother is in there. Those children are in there. Ambassador Cuthbert is in there. If we follow the law, they all die. Morrison opened his eyes and looked around his bridge. He saw the faces of his crew, all waiting for his decision. Carter, young and idealistic, believed in doing the right thing. Hayes, experienced and loyal, would follow any order he gave. Park, careful and scientific, understood the consequences of every choice. What are our tactical options? Morrison asked. Hayes immediately brought up displays on the main screen. The hive ships are focused on the station. They're not expecting an attack. We could disable their ships and breach the station at 3 points. It would be quick and clean. And completely illegal, Morrison said. Yes, sir, completely illegal. Morrison studied the tactical display. The Defiant was a modern Earthship, designed for flexibility and quick response. It could handle 20 hive ships, especially if they were caught by surprise. But using military force in disputed territory without authorization was one of the most serious crimes in galactic law. Sir, Carter said, I'm receiving a transmission from inside the station. It's weak, but it's definitely human. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was broken and filled with static, but Morrison could make out the words. This is Engineer Danny Hayes. The hive has taken over the station. They're processing prisoners in Cargo Bay 3. We have children here, including a group from the new Boston Colony ship that was scheduled to stop here for supplies. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help now. The transmission cut off. Morrison looked at his crew. He looked at the display showing the station. He thought about the 14 days it would take to get authorization. He thought about the children from New Boston, probably scared and crying, as they waited for something terrible to happen to them. He thought about the oath he had taken to protect human life. All hands, this is the captain, Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. We have a situation. There are human and Sorak prisoners being held by the Hive Collective on Station Omega 7. Galactic law says we have to wait for authorization before we can act. But those prisoners will be dead long before any authorization comes. He paused, knowing that his next words would change everything. I'm ordering a rescue operation. What we're about to do is illegal under galactic law. Anyone who participates will be breaking the most fundamental rules of interstellar politics. I won't order anyone to join this mission, but I won't stand by and watch innocent people die while we wait for permission to save them. The bridge was quiet for a moment. Then Hayes spoke up. I'm with you, Captain. Me too, Carter said. And me, Park added. One by one, every member of the crew volunteered for the illegal mission. Morrison felt a surge of pride in his people. This was what made humans different from other species. When the rules failed to protect the innocent, humans made new rules. All right then, Morrison said. Let's go break some laws. The used Defiant moved through space like a hunting shark, all lights dimmed and engines running silent. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display as his ship approached Station Omega 7. The 20 hive ships were still attached to the station like black tumors, their crews busy with their terrible work inside. Status report, Morrison said quietly. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes checked her console. All teams are ready, Captain. Commander Alex Turner has his boarding party standing by in Shuttle Bay 2. Dr. Rachel Stone has her medical team prepared for mass casualties. Sergeant Carlos Rivera has rigged enough explosives to blow a hole in a moon, Morrison nodded. Turner was his best officer for ground operations, a man who could think on his feet and adapt to any situation. Stone was the finest combat medic. In the fleet, someone who could patch up a soldier while under fire. Rivera was simply the best at making things explode when they needed to explode. What about the hive ships? Morrison asked. They're not moving, Hayes replied. Their attention is completely focused on the station. I don't think they're expecting any kind of resistance. That was the thing about the Hive Collective that always bothered Morrison. They thought like a machine, following patterns and expecting everyone else to do the same. They had studied human behavior, but they had studied it like scientists looking at bugs in a jar. They didn't understand that humans were most dangerous when they were angry and desperate. Begin the attack, Morrison ordered. The Defiant's weapons came online with a low hum. Morrison preferred to fight smart rather than fight hard, and this situation called for both. Instead of announcing their presence with a massive barrage, they started with precision strikes. The first shots took out the hive ship's communication arrays. Without their ability to coordinate, the individual ships started behaving like confused insects. The second wave of attacks targeted their engines, trapping them against the station. Direct hits on 12 ships, Hayes reported. The others are trying to detach from the station, but they're moving too slowly. Morrison watched as the hive ships struggled to respond. Their weapons were designed for overwhelming large targets, not for quick defensive actions. Within minutes, half of their fleet was disabled or destroyed. Turner, you're clear for boarding, Morrison said into his communicator. Roger that, Captain. We're going in. Commander Alex Turner led his team of 20 Marines through the shuttle bay and into space. They wore full combat armor and carried enough firepower to level a small building. But Turner knew that in the tight corridors of the station, smart tactics would matter more than heavy weapons. The boarding party attached to the station's hull near the main airlock. Rivera placed his charges and blew a hole big enough for the team to enter. They moved through the breach like water flowing downhill. Fast and smooth. Inside the station, Turner saw what the hive had been doing. The corridors were covered with organic growth, black and green material that pulsed with its own light. The air smelled like rotting meat and chemical cleaners. Worst of all, he could hear sounds from deeper in the station. Sounds of machinery. And something that might have been screaming. Stone, Rivera, take 6 men and head for Cargo Bay 3, Turner ordered. That's where the prisoners are being held. I'll take the rest and secure the command center. Dr. Rachel Stone nodded and led her team deeper into the station. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she moved through the dark corridors like she owned them. Behind her, Rivera carried enough explosives to blow up half the station, and he was grinning like a man who loved his job. Turner's team reached the command center and found it empty except for hive drones. The insect creatures were about 7 feet tall with 4 arms and black carapaces that looked like armor. They moved in perfect coordination, each one knowing exactly what the others were doing. That coordination was also their weakness. Turner had studied hive tactics for years. They were predictable because they always did the most logical thing. When his team opened fire, the drones responded exactly as he expected. They tried to form a defensive line and call for reinforcements. Turner's team didn't fight like that. They split up, attacked from multiple directions, and changed tactics every few seconds. When the drones expected them to advance, they retreated. When the drones expected them to retreat, they charged. This is Turner to all teams, he said into his communicator. Remember, these bugs think like a computer. Do the unexpected and they can't adapt fast enough. Stone's team reached Cargo Bay 3 and found something that made her stomach turn. The hive had set up processing equipment, machines that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a meat grinder. There were dozens of prisoners strapped to tables, humans and Sorek both, waiting their turn. Get those people free, Stone ordered. Rivera, can you disable that equipment without killing everyone in the room? Rivera studied the alien machinery with a professional eye. Give me 2 minutes. I can make it so broken that even the hive can't fix it. Stone and her team started cutting prisoners free from their restraints. The first one was a human child, maybe 8 years old, who was crying and calling for his mother. The second was a Sorak engineer who looked like he had been beaten. "It's okay," Stone told them. "We're here to get you out." As her team worked, Stone looked around the cargo bay. She counted almost 200 prisoners, more than they had expected. Getting them all out would be difficult, but not impossible. "Dr. Stone," one of her Marines called out. "I found Lieutenant Danny Hayes. He's unconscious but alive." Stone rushed over to check on Hayes' brother. He had been beaten and was dehydrated, but he would survive. She gave him a stimulant to wake him up. "Danny? Danny, can you hear me?" The young man's eyes opened slowly. "Dr. Stone? How did you— Are we being rescued?" "Yes, we are. Can you walk?" "I think so." "Doctor, there are children here. Kids from a colony ship that stopped for supplies. The hive took them first." Stone looked around the cargo bay and saw them. About 20 children, all between the ages of 5 and 12, all terrified and confused. Getting them out would be the hardest part of the mission. "Rivera, how are those explosives coming?" "Almost done, Doc. This gear will never work again." Turner's voice came through the communicator. "All teams, we have a problem. The hive is sending reinforcements from deeper in the station. Looks like they had more drones than we thought." Stone could hear weapons fire echoing through the station corridors. The rescue was turning into a running battle. "How many prisoners can we evacuate?" Turner asked. Stone looked around the cargo bay. 200 prisoners, including 20 children, all weak and scared. Moving them through a combat zone would be nearly impossible. "All of them," she said. "We're not leaving anyone behind." "Doctor, that's not realistic. We need to prioritize." Stone felt anger rising in her chest. This was exactly the kind of thinking that had gotten them into this situation. Making choices about who lived and who died based on what was convenient. "Commander Turner, I didn't break galactic law to save some of these people. I broke it to save all of them. We find a way to get everyone out, or we die trying." Turner was quiet for a moment, then he laughed. "You know what, Doc? You're right. Rivera, how much explosive do you have left?" "Enough to make a new door anywhere you want one, sir." "Good, because we're going to need a lot of new doors." The next 30 minutes were chaos. Turner's team fought a running battle through the station corridors, using every dirty trick they had ever learned. They used the station's own systems. Against the hive, turning off lights and gravity in sections where the drones were fighting, Rivera blew holes in walls to create new escape routes. Stone organized the prisoners into groups, with the strongest helping the weakest. Danny Hayes, despite his injuries, helped carry some of the younger children. The most difficult part was moving through the sections where the hive had spread their organic growth. The black material was slippery and seemed to pulse with its own life. Some of the prisoners were afraid to touch it, but Stone pushed them forward. "It's just alien technology," she told them. "It can't hurt you any more than we're going to let it." Ambassador Kethver, the Sorak diplomat, proved to be tougher than anyone expected. Despite being beaten and held prisoner for hours, he helped. Organized the other Sorak prisoners and even carried some of the human children when they became too tired to walk. "Your species is remarkable," he told Stone as they moved through a damaged corridor. "Most races would have followed the law and let us die. Humans choose to break the law and let us live." Stone didn't have time to think about philosophy. She was too busy keeping everyone alive, but she realized that the ambassador was right. This rescue wasn't just about saving lives. It was about proving that sometimes the right thing to do was the illegal thing to do. Turner's voice came through her communicator. "All teams, move to evacuation point Charlie. We have shuttles incoming." Stone looked around the cargo bay one more time. They had freed everyone. 200 prisoners, all alive, all heading for safety. Rivera had destroyed the hive processing equipment so completely that it looked like it had been hit by a meteor. "This is Stone to Turner. All prisoners are free and moving to evacuation. How are we doing on time?" "We're cutting it close, Doc. The hive is bringing up." 3 months after the rescue at Station Omega 7, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the defendant's dock on Concordia Prime. The courtroom was massive, designed to hold representatives from dozens of different alien species. Above him, floating, in crystalline chambers filled with various gases and liquids, sat the judges of the Galactic Council. Morrison had been to Concordia Prime before, but never as a prisoner. The planet was neutral territory, a place where different species could meet without fear of conflict. The buildings were strange combinations of architecture from across the galaxy, with floating spires next to underground caverns all connected by tubes of breathable atmosphere. The prosecutor was a being called HFY, a member of the Mineral Consortium. HFY looked like a walking crystal formation, with light patterns that changed colors as it spoke. When it moved, Morrison could hear a sound like wind chimes. "Honored judges," HFY said, its voice like the sound of glass breaking. "The case before us is simple." Captain Morrison willfully violated the Territorial Sovereignty Act, the Non-Interference Directive, and the Weapons Limitation Treaty. These laws exist to prevent exactly the kind of chaos that Morrison's actions created. Morrison looked around the courtroom. In the gallery, he could see representatives from dozens of species all watching the trial with interest. Some looked angry, others seemed curious. A few appeared to be afraid. To his surprise, his defense attorney was not human. Whisper of Truth was a member of the Ethereal Collective, a species that existed as sentient gas clouds. It communicated through changes in atmospheric pressure and temperature, which were translated into words by the court systems. "Honored judges," Whisper of Truth said, its voice like wind through leaves. While Captain Morrison did break the written law, he upheld something far more important. He protected the fundamental right of all sentient beings to live free from harm. The first witness was General Thrakmer of the Sorak military. The reptilian being was over 8 feet tall, with scales that looked like armor and teeth that could bite through metal. When he spoke, his voice was like gravel in a cement mixer. "The human rescue operation was studied by our military analyst," Thrakmer said. "What we found was disturbing. Human combat methods do not follow any predictable pattern. They change tactics constantly, sometimes in the middle of a battle. They make decisions that appear to be mistakes but turn out to be advantages." HFY's lights pulsed with satisfaction. "So you would say that human military actions are dangerous and unpredictable?" "Yes," Thrakmer replied. "But that is exactly why we want them as allies rather than enemies." The prosecutor's lights flickered in. "Confusion? Excuse me?" "The Sorak Confederation has been studying human tactics for months," Thrakmer explained. "We are developing new military doctrines based on human principles of adaptive warfare. Our generals are learning to think like humans think, to be unpredictable and creative in combat." Morrison felt a chill. He had not realized that the rescue mission was being studied so closely by alien militaries. The next witness was even more disturbing. Speaker of the swarm was a hive drone, but one that had been modified to communicate with other species. It looked like a 7-foot-tall insect, with mechanical attachments that allowed it to speak. "The collective has completely restructured our military planning," Speaker of the swarm said in a voice like grinding metal. "Human behavior patterns have been classified as a primary threat to collective expansion. We have developed new drone types specifically designed to counter human unpredictability." Whisper of Truth moved through the courtroom, creating small whirlwinds as it circled the witness. "You fear human military capabilities?" "We fear human thinking," Speaker of the Swarm replied. "The collective operates on logic and efficiency. Humans operate on emotion and improvisation. This makes them impossible to predict and extremely dangerous." Morrison realized that the trial was revealing something nobody had expected. The rescue mission had not just saved lives. It had changed how every major military in the galaxy thought about warfare. The trial continued for days. Witness after witness testified about human behavior and its impact on galactic stability. Some praised Morrison's actions, others condemned them. But they all agreed on one thing: humans were different from every other species in the galaxy. Dr. Helen Grant a human xenopsychologist, explained the scientific reasons for this difference. Most species in the galaxy evolved on worlds with stable environments, she said. They developed social structures based on following rules and maintaining order. Humans evolved on Earth, which is what we call a death world. Our planet has extreme weather, dangerous animals, and natural disasters. Humans learn to survive by adapting quickly and breaking patterns when necessary. The courtroom was silent as she continued. This means that human ethics are different from galactic ethics. When galactic law says to wait for authorization, while innocent people die, human instinct says to act immediately. We cannot help this. It is how we evolved. Morrison watched the judges as they listened to Dr. Grant's testimony. Some of them seemed to be understanding the human perspective for the first time. Others looked more worried than before. The turning point came when Ambassador Kethver took the witness stand. The Sorak diplomat had been one of the prisoners. Rescued from Station Omega-7, he walked slowly to the witness area, still showing signs of the injuries he had suffered. Ambassador Kethver, Zeftai said, you were illegally rescued by Captain Morrison's forces. Do you believe his actions were justified? Morrison expected Kethver to give a diplomatic answer, something that would not offend anyone. Instead, the ambassador surprised everyone in the courtroom. Not only were Captain Morrison's actions justified, Kethver said, they were necessary. The Galactic Council's laws failed to protect innocent lives. When law fails, someone must step forward and do what is right. The prosecutor's lights flickered rapidly. But surely you understand that his actions violated the most fundamental principles of galactic governance? I understand that without his actions I would be dead, Kethver replied. Along with 200 other beings, including 20 human. Children, the Galactic Council's laws are important, but they are not more important than the lives of innocent people. Then Kethver said something that shocked everyone in the courtroom. The Sora Confederation has been working on new alliance. Protocols specifically designed to work with human decision-making processes. We call them chaos tactics. We believe that human unpredictability, combined with Sorak military discipline, will create the most effective fighting force in the galaxy. Morrison felt his stomach drop. The rescue mission had done more than save lives. It had started an arms race with different species trying to understand and copy human military thinking. The trial took another unexpected turn when Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes was called to testify. She walked to the witness area wearing her dress uniform, every button polished and every crease sharp. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, Whisper of Truth said, your brother was among the prisoners rescued from Station Omega-7. Did this personal connection influence your decision to support Captain Morrison's illegal actions? Hayes looked directly at the judges as she answered. My brother was one of the prisoners, yes. But there were also children from a colony ship, Sorak engineers, and Ambassador Kethver. I would have supported the rescue mission even if my brother had not been there. Why? Whisper of Truth asked. Because it was the right thing to do, Hayes said simply. The law said to wait for authorization while innocent people died. Human conscience said to act immediately and save lives. When law and conscience conflict, humans choose conscience. Zeftius' lights pulsed angrily. Even if it means chaos? Even if it means the breakdown of galactic order? Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that would be quoted in military academies across the galaxy for years to come. There is no order worth preserving if it requires innocent people to die for the sake of paperwork. The courtroom erupted in noise as different species reacted to her words. Some cheered, others made sounds of disapproval. The judges called for order. But Morrison could see that Hayes had touched something important. The final witness was Morrison himself. He walked to the witness area knowing that his words would determine not just his own fate, but possibly the future relationship between humans and the rest of the galaxy. Captain Morrison, Zeftai said, do you admit that you willfully violated galactic law? Yes, Morrison said simply. Do you regret your actions? Morrison looked around the courtroom. He saw the faces of different species all watching him with interest. He thought about the children from the colony ship, now safe with their families. He thought about Ambassador Kethver, who had testified in his defense. He thought about the 200 lives that had been saved. No, Morrison said. I regret that galactic law put me in a position where I had to choose between following rules and saving lives. But I do not regret choosing to save lives, even knowing the consequences. Even knowing the consequences. Zephtiah's lights pulsed with satisfaction. So you admit that you believe human judgment is superior to galactic law? Morrison thought carefully before answering. I believe that human judgment is different from galactic law. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his holding cell on Concordia Prime, waiting for the Galactic Council to announce their verdict. He had been awake for hours, thinking about the trial and what might happen next. Through the small window in his cell, he could see alien ships arriving at the space station, carrying diplomats and reporters from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to know what would happen to the human who had broken the most sacred laws of interstellar politics. The door to his cell opened, and Commander Patricia Walsh walked in. Morrison had not seen Walsh since before the rescue mission. She was an intelligence officer, someone who dealt with information and secrets rather than weapons and battles. Captain, Walsh said, sitting down across from him. We need to talk. Morrison studied her face. Walsh looked tired, like someone who had not slept well in weeks. What's on your mind, Patricia? The attack on Station Omega 7 was not what we thought it was, Walsh said quietly. We've been investigating for months, and what we found changes everything. She pulled out a datapad and showed Morrison a series of documents. The Hive collective attack was planned. But not by the Hive, it was organized by a group calling itself the Stability Preservation Alliance. Morrison looked at the documents. They were communication records, meeting notes, and financial transfers. Who is the Stability Preservation Alliance? 12 major galactic powers who were worried about human influence in the galaxy, Walsh explained. They included the Crystalline Hegemony, the Gas Giant Federation, and even some members of the Sorak military. They wanted to test how humans would respond to a moral crisis. Morrison felt anger rising in his chest. They set up the attack? They put those people in danger just to test us? It gets worse, Walsh said. They expected one of two outcomes. Either humans would follow galactic law and let the prisoners die, which would prove that humans could be controlled by legal pressure. Or humans would break the law and save the prisoners, which would give them an excuse to remove humanity from the Galactic Council. Morrison stared at the datapad. They wanted to discredit us either way, yes, but their plan failed completely. Instead of proving that humans were either weak or lawless, your rescue demonstrated something they didn't expect. You showed that human moral judgment could supersede galactic law and still be right. Walsh pulled up another document. After the rescue, something unexpected happened. Instead of demanding punishment for humans, most galactic species started asking questions about their own laws. The Aquatic Collective revised their emergency response protocols. The mountain folk changed their rules about protecting civilians. Even the machine intelligences updated their ethical programming. Morrison realized what Walsh was telling him. The rescue didn't just save lives. It changed how the galaxy thinks about law and morality, exactly. And that terrified the Stability Preservation Alliance. They thought they were testing human weakness. Instead, they revealed the weakness of their own system. The door opened again, and Whisper of Truth, Morrison's defense attorney, flowed into the room. The gaseous being filled the space with a sweet smell like flowers after rain. Captain Morrison, Whisper of Truth said, the judges are ready to announce their verdict. But first, I must tell you something important. This trial has become much more than a simple legal proceeding. Morrison stood up. What do you mean? Representatives from over 40 species have been meeting in private sessions during the trial, Whisper of Truth explained. They are not just deciding your fate. They are deciding whether galactic law needs to be changed to accommodate species like humans who think differently than others. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. So this is not just about me, no, Whisper of Truth said. This is about the future of galactic civilization. Your actions have forced every species to ask hard questions about the relationship between law and morality. They walked through the corridors of the courthouse toward the main courtroom. Along the way, Morrison saw groups of aliens in deep conversation. Some were arguing, others were sharing information on datapads. A few were simply watching him with curiosity. In the courtroom, Morrison took his place in the defendant's dock. Above him, the judges of the Galactic Council floated in their various chambers. Judge Kalarthax, the ancient being who served as the council's leader, spoke first. "Captain Morrison," Judge Kalarthax said, his voice filling the courtroom like distant thunder, "this trial has revealed important truths about galactic law and human nature. Before we announce our verdict, we will hear from additional witnesses who came forward during our deliberations." The first new witness was Dr. Elena Vasquez, a human psychologist who specialized in cross-species communication. Morrison had never seen her before, but she walked to the witness area with confidence. "Dr. Vasquez," Judge Kalarthax said, "you have studied human behavior in crisis situations. What makes humans different from other galactic species?" "Humans evolved under constant pressure," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Our planet forced us to adapt, quickly or die. This created a species that values flexibility over stability, innovation over tradition, and individual moral judgment over group consensus." She gestured toward Morrison. When Captain Morrison faced the choice between law and conscience, he made the choice that millions of years of evolution had programmed him to make. He prioritized immediate action to save lives over long-term political stability. The next witness surprised everyone. Admiral Zorthak of the Crystalline Hegemony was one of the most respected military leaders in the galaxy. His crystal body glowed with inner light as he testified. "The Crystalline Hegemony has been studying the Station Omega-7 incident for months," Admiral Zorthak said. "We initially viewed human actions as dangerous and destabilizing. However, our analysis revealed something unexpected." The Admiral's glow brightened. "Human tactical methods, while unpredictable, are also highly effective. More importantly, human moral reasoning often produces better outcomes than strict adherence to existing law." Prosecutor Zeftias' lights flickered with confusion. You saying that breaking the law was the correct action?" "I'm saying that human instincts produced a better result than galactic law would have," Admiral Zorthak replied. "This suggests that our laws may need to be updated to account for situations where immediate action is more important than proper procedure." The biggest surprise came when Speaker for the Council, the representative of the Ethereal Collective, announced a joint statement from multiple species. "Honored judges," Speaker for the Council said, "during this trial, representatives from 37 galactic species have been meeting to discuss the implications of human moral reasoning. We have reached a consensus." Morrison held his breath. "We believe that galactic law must evolve to accommodate species with different ethical frameworks." Speaker for the Council continued. "We propose the creation of humanitarian exceptions to existing treaties, allowing for immediate action in situations where innocent lives are at risk." The courtroom erupted in noise as different species reacted to this announcement. Some cheered. Others made sounds of disapproval. Judge Kalarthax called for order. "Furthermore," Speaker for the Council said when the noise died down, "we propose that Captain Morrison's actions be classified not as criminal behavior, but as a test case for these new humanitarian protocols." Morrison could hardly believe what he was hearing. The trial was not just clearing him of charges, it was changing galactic law itself. Judge Kalarthax raised one of his tentacles for silence. "Captain Morrison, please stand for the verdict." Morrison stood, his legs feeling unsteady. Around him, the courtroom was completely quiet. After extensive deliberation, Judge Kalarthax announced, "This council finds Captain Morrison guilty of violating the Territorial Sovereignty Act, the Non-Interference Directive, and the Weapons Limitation Treaty." Morrison's heart sank. Despite everything, they were still convicting him. "However," Judge Kalarthax continued, "this council also finds that Captain Morrison's actions, while technically illegal, were morally justified and produced outcomes that better served galactic interests than strict adherence to existing law would have. The judge paused, letting his words sink in. Therefore, Captain Morrison is sentenced to remedial diplomatic service, working with the Galactic Council to develop new humanitarian intervention protocols. These protocols will be known as the Morrison Doctrine. Morrison felt relief flooding through him. Not only was he avoiding prison, he was being asked to help create new laws that would prevent future moral crises. The Morrison Doctrine, Judge Kalarthax explained, will create legal frameworks for immediate humanitarian action in situations where existing law would prevent the protection of innocent lives. It will also establish joint task forces, including human personnel specifically trained to handle crisis situations that require flexible thinking. Commander Walsh leaned over to Morrison and whispered, "They're not just pardoning you. They're making you the model for a new kind of galactic law enforcement." Judge Kalarthax was not finished. This council recognizes that humanity brings a unique perspective to galactic civilization. Human willingness to break rules when those rules fail to protect innocent people is not a weakness to be controlled. It is a strength to be harnessed. 6 months after the trial, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the stars streak past as his ship jumped to hyperspace. But this was not the same ship that had rescued prisoners from Station Omega-7. The Defiant had been upgraded with technology from 12 different species, and its crew now included aliens as well as humans. "Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes from her tactical station, "we're receiving the emergency signal from the Andromeda Relay. Multiple star systems are reporting natural disasters and requesting immediate assistance." Morrison nodded. The Andromeda Relay was a network of space stations that helped ships travel between distant parts of the galaxy. A solar storm had damaged several relay stations, trapping thousands of beings on planets that were experiencing earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and massive storms. "How many people are we talking about?" Morrison asked. Dr. Rachel Stone, now the Chief Medical Officer of the Rapid Response Initiative, checked her reports. Initial estimates show over 50,000 beings across 7 different worlds. The disasters are getting worse, and traditional rescue ships can't reach them because the relay stations are down. Morrison looked around his bridge. In addition to his human crew, he now had alien officers working alongside them. Tactical Officer Vextai was a member of the crystalline hegemony, her crystal body glowing with inner light as she processed data. Navigation Officer Humdock was from the Gas Giant Federation, his gaseous form contained in a specialized environmental suit. Communications Officer Theckener was a young Sorak who had volunteered to learn human-style crisis management. "What's the normal procedure for this kind of emergency?" Morrison asked. Theckener checked the galactic emergency protocols. "Standard procedure requires filing a disaster relief request with the Galactic Council, waiting for approval, coordinating with local governments, and then dispatching appropriate rescue vessels. The entire process takes approximately 2 weeks." Morrison felt the familiar frustration with galactic bureaucracy. "And how long do those people have?" Dr. Stone looked grim. "Based on the geological reports, maybe 3 days before the worst disasters hit." Commander Alex Turner, now Morrison's deputy for ground operations, spoke up from his station. "Captain, we have authorization under the Morrison Doctrine to act immediately in humanitarian crises." "We don't need to wait for the Council," Morrison smiled. The Morrison Doctrine had changed everything. Instead of having to break the law to save lives, they now had legal authority to act quickly when people were in danger. But the real change was not in the law. The real change was in how different species work together. "All right, people," Morrison announced. "We're going to do what we do best. We're going to save everyone we can, and we're going to do it in ways that nobody expects." The next few hours were controlled chaos. The Rapid Response Initiative had ships and personnel from over 20 different species all working together in ways that had never been tried before. Human ships provided speed and flexibility. Sauric vessels offered heavy lifting capability. Crystalline ships had the most advanced medical equipment. Gas giant Federation ships could operate in environments that would kill other species, but the most important change was in how they thought about problems. "Captain," Vextai said, her crystal body pulsing with excitement, "I have an idea that I learned from studying human tactics. Instead of trying to repair the relay stations first, what if we bypass them completely?" Morrison raised an eyebrow. "How do we do that?" "We use the gas giant Federation ships as mobile relay points," Vextai explained. "They can generate the energy fields needed for hyperspace jumps, and they're small enough to position exactly where we need them." Humdock made a sound like wind through caves, which his translator converted to laughter. "That is completely outside standard operating procedures. I love it." This was what Morrison had hoped for when the Morrison Doctrine was created. Aliens were not just learning human tactics. They were adapting human thinking and applying it to their own capabilities. The rescue operation began with Dr. Stone leading a medical team to the planet Kepler 442b, where volcanic eruptions were threatening a colony of peaceful plant-like beings called the root folk. Traditional medical equipment would not work on the root folk, but Stone had an idea. "We can't treat them like animals or humans," Stone explained to her mixed-species medical team. "But we can treat them like plants. We need to stabilize their root systems and provide the nutrients they need to survive the volcanic ash." Her team included a crystalline medic who could analyze soil composition instantly, a Sauric engineer who could dig protective trenches, and a human botanist who understood plant biology. Working together, they created a treatment that no single species could have developed alone. Meanwhile, Turner led a rescue team to the water world of Aquatica Prime, where massive storms were threatening underwater cities. The Aquatic Collective had excellent underwater technology, but they were not good at emergency evacuations. "The problem is that they think too much," Turner explained to his team. "They want to plan every detail before they act. But in a crisis, you have to move fast and adjust as you go." Turner's team included humans who could think quickly, aquatic beings who knew the underwater environment, and machine intelligences who could process massive amounts of data instantly. They developed an evacuation plan that used chaos theory and fluid dynamics to move thousands of people through underwater tunnels in the most efficient way possible. The most challenging rescue was on the desert world of Arid Prime, where sandstorms and earthquakes were threatening a research station filled with beings from 6 different species. The station was buried under sand, and traditional digging equipment would take too long. Morrison decided to handle this one personally. He took a small team that included Hayes, Sergeant Carlos Rivera, and volunteers from 4 alien species. When they reached the buried station, Morrison looked at the situation and made a decision that would have been impossible under the old galactic laws. "We're going to blow it up," Morrison announced. The alien members of his team looked shocked. Theckener, the young Thorak officer, made a sound of distress. "Captain, that will destroy the station and everyone in it." "No," Morrison said with a grin. "We're going to blow up the sand around the station. Rivera, can you create a controlled explosion that will clear the sand without damaging the structure underneath?" Rivera studied the geological readings. "It's possible, but it's crazy. One mistake, and we kill everyone we're trying to save." "That's why it will work," Hayes said, understanding Morrison's thinking. "Nobody would expect us to use explosives to save people, so nobody would have developed defenses against it." The explosion worked perfectly. The sand was blown away from the station in a carefully controlled pattern, creating a clear area where rescue ships could land. The beings inside the station were shaken but unharmed. As they evacuated the research station, Dr. Elena Martinez, a scientist who had been trapped inside, approached Morrison. "Captain, how did you know that would work?" Morrison thought about the question. "I didn't know it would work, but I knew that traditional methods would take too long and those people would die if we followed normal procedures. So we tried something that nobody had ever done before." Dr. Martinez shook her head in amazement. "That's not logical." "No," Morrison agreed, "but it's human. Over the next 48 hours, the Rapid Response Initiative saved over 47,000 beings across 7 worlds. They used methods that combined human creativity with alien capabilities in ways that no single species could have achieved. More importantly, they did it all legally. The Morrison Doctrine gave them the authority to act immediately, and the Joint Task Force structure let them combine different approaches to problem solving when the crisis was over. Morrison found himself in his ready room with Ambassador Kethver, who had come to observe the operation for the Galactic Council. "Captain," Kethver said, "what you have accomplished here goes beyond saving lives. You have created a new model for how different species can work together." Morrison poured himself a cup of coffee and offered Kethver some of the herbal tea that Sorak preferred. "How so?" "Before the Morrison Doctrine, each species worked separately, following their own procedures and thinking," Kethver explained. "What you have done is create teams where each species contributes their strengths while learning from the others." Morrison thought about his mixed species crew. Vextai was learning human-style flexible thinking. Humdock was teaching humans about energy manipulation. Theckener was developing new communication protocols that combined human intuition with Sorak precision. "The galaxy feared what would happen when humans broke the rules," Kethver continued. "Now they understand that when humans break rules, they create better rules." Morrison looked out the window of his ready room at the stars. "We didn't set out to change the galaxy. We just wanted to save some people. That is exactly why it worked," Kethver said. "You acted from genuine care for others, not from a desire for power or control. Other species can sense that, and it makes them willing to trust human judgment even when they don't understand human methods." A few days later, Morrison received a message from Fleet Admiral Sarah Johnson, his superior at Earth Command.